Welcome to the Back in Time podcast with Kyle and JD, where every week we jump into our DeLorean, cruise to 88 miles per hour, and travel back in time to review our favorite films. Every week we talk about current cinema, the latest trailers, and we pick a new favorite film every single episode.
But I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. 1.21 gigawatts!
Don't say that! Never say that! Goonies never say die!
We're the best, we're the beautiful, we're the only Ghostbusters.
Now, here's your host, Kyle Autry, and his co-host, JD. Welcome back to the Back in Time podcast. I am your host, Kyle Autry, joined by my co-host, JD. JD, how are you today?
Doing well, slipping cash all over town all day long.
It's good, man. Looking forward to getting into our topic this week. We're going to have a special guest. He'll be with us in a couple minutes. We're going to have Carlos from the Be Kind Rewind podcast, and we'll let him talk about his show here in a minute. But I want to thank you guys for hitting the download button on episode 55. This week, we are discussing the 1987 crime film thriller, Adventures in Babysitting. Before we get into some babysitting, let's talk about last week's episode. JD, what kind of feedback did you hear from our home improvement episode? Two-parter.
Two-parter for sure, and very happy to hear that a lot of you guys responded happily to some of our grunts. Apparently, half of us need some work on some of our but the other half seem to be in good shape, and gotta say, a lot of love for our hatred of Mark came out.
Yep, Mark is not the most popular, that's for sure. I did put up a little something on our Instagram at Back in Time Pod, and I put up just like a storyline. I posted, does anybody remember watching this show in the 90s? Was this something that you sat down and did? And we had about 70 votes, and 90% of the people that responded said yes. Only 10% said they were too young. Yeah, I was surprised. We got a ton of feedback on that poll. Thank you guys for following us on social media. We're also on Twitter, Facebook. You can shoot us an email at backintimepodcast@gmail.com. As always, subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, YouTube. And that doesn't cost you guys anything, but it does help us grow this podcast and continue to get new listeners. All right, on the line right now, we've got Carlos from the Be Kind Rewind podcast. Carlos, thanks for joining us, man.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, we're excited to talk some adventures and babysitting with you here. So, man, real quick, before we jump into the review and talk all things adventures and babysitting, just plug your show a little bit for somebody that's not familiar with what your show's about and how long you've been doing it. Let's just start with that.
Yeah. So the Be Kind Rewind podcast has started late last year. So we're in our second year, and just started from me just being a nostalgic all around. So I had a YouTube channel for a little bit where I did movie reviews, and then we did a podcast, more of like a movie news podcast. And then the end game was like, I want to do just a straight up podcast. And then I came to the conclusion that I want to do the nostalgic podcast. So it came up with the Be Kind Rewind podcast, the reference to make sure you rewind your VHSs before Blockbuster charges you $2 for them to toss it in some machine to rewind it for them. And so yeah, that's where the name came from. And I really wanted to not only talk about, nostalgic things from like 80s and 90s and kind of like early 2000s, but I wanted to bring in some of the celebrities that we grew up watching and having fun, like enjoying their movies. So, we started out, my very first interview and episode was with Keith Coogan, who's is in Adventures Babysitting and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead that we'll talk about today. So he's been great. Like he and I, we've stayed in touch. I've seen him at a couple Comic-Cons, and I went out to LA earlier this year, and he met up with me. We did a cool podcast out there. So definitely enjoyed Keith Coogan and other celebrities. Like we were talking about, like some people from Mighty Ducks, Nickelodeon. We're actually going to have some people on from Salute Your Shorts we have coming up. We have people from The Sandlot. So like I said, it's a continuing snowball in regards to the awesome stuff that keeps happening. So yeah, it's a weekly podcast on Thursdays. So for those who want to tune in, the Thursday mornings is when the episodes are released.
That's awesome. Hey man, who's on your bucket list? Who do you want to interview?
Um, I would say Lou Diamond Phillips. Just
Okay.
because Lou La Bamba was like my jam back in the day.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was growing up a little Mexican kid who played guitar. I was like, oh man, I gotta be Richie Valens one day and Lou Diamond Phillips. But yeah, Lou Diamond Phillips is definitely up there because like I said, from La Bamba to everything else, Young Guns, everything else he's been in, he's been in some pretty awesome stuff. So he's definitely at the top of my list, I think, trying to get somebody on this podcast.
Yeah, that'd be a really good get. He's still pretty busy too.
Yeah, it's one of those you kind of had to play the game. Like you want to get celebrities who are, celebrities, but sometimes they're not, they're not reachable or they're busy, like you said. So you kind of want to talk to people you like that you know that you can get in touch with, and maybe have a little more time for you to get into more things about their background.
Cool. So let's jump into our first segment. We do this every week. It's called Oh Wow.
Wow, flippers and all. Wow. 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 This is a nice boat. Wow, I sort of got screwed on the old bedroom selection. Every room's like 4 times as big as mine.
JD, start us off, man. What's your oh wow moment of the week?
I personally got to say, I was kind of floored when I found out that they remade this movie back in 2016. I had no idea that that was happening, completely off my radar, and just, oh, wow.
Yeah, I did not know there was a sequel to that. Did you know that, Carlos?
So what movie was that?
Adventures in Babysitting.
I thought they had like a Netflix show, but I didn't know they did a movie.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like I'm staring at it now. Yeah, hour and 45 minutes, came out in 2016. Yeah, that's wow. That is a
Apparently,
pretty good oh wow.
A Disney Channel movie, so
How dare
I
they?
didn't know they were still making those.
That's crazy. Yeah, one of the girls from Girl Meets World was in it as the main character. Okay. All right, man. Carlos, how about you, man? Any oh wow moments for you?
From keeping it within movie news, I did see that Tim Miller's, he was going to direct Deadpool 2 until they kind of parted ways due to creative differences. But his original idea, I guess, was to have the Fantastic Four in Deadpool 2.
Oh wow.
And they were
Yeah,
going to
that
like
would've been
kill
nice.
off a couple of the characters. Yeah, like it was going to, maybe that was the creative difference that Ryan Reynolds just could not get on board with.
Okay. Yeah, I did
So
not know that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Well, granted, yes, he's not. They've already released the movie, but that would have been interesting, I think, to use those rights. I guess if Fox were going to use the rights for anything to keep use a movie to keep the rights, I guess this will be the one to use.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay. Hey, are you a sports fan at all, Carlos?
Oh yeah,
Okay. Cool. So my oh wow moment of the week is going to be this new stupid head rule from the NFL. I watched a lot of the preseason games this week. Man, just anytime somebody lowers a helmet, they're throwing flags, they're 15-yard penalties. I hate it. Being a former football player, the new rule pisses me off.
I mean, I thought they already had this rule in place, or are they just like, or like kind of one of those beginning of the years, like we're gonna really like make this aware to all the players that we're not kidding about this time.
Right. So last year they implemented like the running backs couldn't lower their head for contact, if you remember that. This year it's pretty much anybody. Like for example, I was watching the Bears versus Broncos game, and there was just an out route on the outside, and the defender came through and he just kind of put his head into the guy's like thigh pad, 15-yard penalty. And normally that's just like a tackle from a smaller guy. It was nothing big, like he didn't do anything malicious, and then they're calling it like crazy. So I'm sure they're doing it a lot in preseason to get the guys used to it, because that makes sense. But man, that is a stupid rule, and I don't know what's next. I'm just taking off the helmets completely, just playing tag. JD, did you see any of that?
No, I tend to avoid the preseason games. I didn't know that they were cutting down any further, but it's a stupid rule, and it definitely defeats the purpose, I think, of football. And I'm saying that as somebody who's had 10 football-related concussions in my life. I did everything leading with the helmet and found great success in it. And look at me, I'm doing well.
Now, it was weird yesterday when you told me that you walked to the store without your pants on, but I mean, your head's fine though, right?
I brought them with me. I just didn't put them on.
Right.
So
So,
that's just being proactive.
For sure, keep leading with your head though, buddy. It's working well. Now, let's do some intro to Adventures in Babysitting. So this movie is also known as A Night on the Town in certain countries. It's a 1987 comedy American film written by David Simpkins, directed by Christopher Columbus. It's actually his directorial debut. Stars Elizabeth Shue, Keith Coogan, Anthony Rapp, Penelope Ann Miller, and a slew of others. And the movie is basically about a babysitter who must battle her way through the big city after being stranded there with the kids she's looking after. Man, Carlos, what was your first memory of watching Adventures in Babysitting?
I think that Thor is gay is probably one of my first memories. I remember watching it at literally at my babysitter's growing up, because she had an encyclopedia of all the movies that she recorded onto VHS. So we were watching Adventures in Babysitting. I just remember being thrown because, of course, growing up, we watched these cute cookie cutter type movies with no salt to, or no extra spice into them in regards to cussing from kids and like some crazy scenarios. So watching Adventures in Babysitting for me as a young kid was definitely eye-opening to the awesomeness that could be, especially that we would get more from the 80s movies like that.
JD, how about you? What you remember your intro to the movie?
I know I saw this when I was young, and this movie personally scared me, being that I grew up in Chicago and I didn't get to a lot of what they show. You don't just run into mobsters and chop shops on a normal day. Mostly it's business as normal, but definitely the knife to the foot scene always freaked me out as a kid, and I was always afraid of public transportation after that.
Yeah, the knife to the foot scene is great. I can't wait till we discuss that. Yeah, and you're right. A lot of the filming took place in Chicago. It's shot along Wells Street, which is pretty popular in Chicago. They started filming on January 5th, and they wrapped in March of 87, and then released it in theaters in July 3rd, actually. That's a super quick turnaround. I don't know of any other movies outside of, I know Back to the Future was a really quick turnaround because we just talked about that a couple weeks ago. But less than 4 months, Carlos. That seems pretty short, right?
Oh man, that is crazy quick for any movie.
They must have had guys cutting film around the clock to hit this
They
deadline.
must have been like, as soon as they cut from the set, they're like editing it for final cut.
Yeah.
Day of. So yeah, that is a quick turnaround. I wonder what the marketing, of course they probably had a lot of stuff to start out the marketing pretty quickly, but I don't remember it being like the box office being that over the top or crazy. Did it have a big box office to substantiate the quickness?
They did pretty good at the box office, but it definitely wasn't real overwhelming by any means. I think this is a movie that really caught on through VHS rentals and, just being on TV for all those years. But they did gross over $30 million. So that's pretty good. I think they were around $10 million on the budget. So that's a pretty good turnaround.
They're trying to cash in on that Elizabeth Shue, that
Karate
stardom,
Kid money,
that
right?
that post Karate Kid Shue stardom.
We always do some interesting facts for the show, so I've got a couple good ones here that I pulled. So one of the movie's producers is Deborah Hill, who actually teamed with John Carpenter to make Halloween in 1978. It's about a horror movie it's a horror movie about a stalker who murders babysitters. And if you listen carefully when Sarah and Chris are watching television, the music you can hear in the background is the John Carpenter Halloween theme song. I thought that was pretty cool, but it's a little in-joke from Deborah Hill. JD, did you pick up on that at all, watching the movie back?
I thought that I did. As I was watching that scene, I was like, oh, this just reminds me of Halloween, and I couldn't put my thumb on it, so apparently that's why.
Yeah, it's very subtle. I did not even catch it the first time through. I had to go back and watch it. So I thought that was pretty cool. In both this film and in Back to the Future, Elizabeth Shue faints and says the line, "I had the worst nightmare." Also, in Back to the Future 2 and 3, Elizabeth Shue's character's last name is Parker, the same as Adventures in Babysitting. Carlos, what do you think of that tie-in?
The universe, they're tied. They're connected. She's cheating on Marty, and she's getting with that asshole. What's his name? And then
Mike.
Mike. Yeah, So I don't know. Elizabeth Shue, she's got some explaining to do.
Yep. There's also another cool little tie-in. Sarah is wearing a backpack in several of the scenes, and on the back of the book bag is a picture of Gizmo on it. It's a reference to Gremlins, which was written by Chris Columbus. JD, did you catch that little Easter egg?
Most certainly did not.
Yeah, that's a good one to look for. And then there's a little bit of casting I thought was interesting. Sharon Stone auditioned for this lead role, but did not get it. Kathleen Turner was the first choice, but turned it down. Kelly McGillis reportedly wanted the lead role, but Columbus turned her down. And then Brooke Shields was considered as well for the lead role. Carlos, can you imagine any of those 4 leading ladies in this role here instead of Elizabeth Shue?
I would have taken Brooke Shields probably. Out of all of them, I could see her probably, because they both have that classic beauty to look to them. And I don't know which one's older at the time. I mean, Elizabeth Shue is supposed to be playing a high schooler. She's like, 28 in this movie.
Yeah, she's pretty old.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're both, whatever age. But yeah, I could see Brooke Shields playing this if Elizabeth Shue didn't do it.
Yeah, she is 24 in this movie. And that would have made Brooke Shields 22, so not much of a difference there. But yeah, Brooke Shields, we salute you. Sha-wing. Nice. All right, so we'll take a quick break. We're going to be back on the other side with the full review.
Wait a minute, what are you doing, Doc? I need fuel.
Maybe it's Mike. Hello?
Will you accept a collect call from Brenda?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Chris, it's Brenda.
Brenda?
Chris!
Brenda, what's wrong?
Oh, Chris, I'm in trouble.
Brenda, you're always in trouble.
No, I'm really in trouble. I did it.
You spiked your tab with Drano?
No, I ran away from home.
You what? Where are you?
I'm at the bus station downtown.
Brenda, look, just don't go anywhere.
I can't. I don't have any money. I spent it all on the cab here.
All right, so we're back from the break. We're going to jump into Adventures in Babysitting, give the full review here. So we've got a really great 80s intro sequence here to start the movie. Elizabeth Shue's character named Chris is dancing all over her room. She's getting ready for the big date night. JD, what's your first impression here of Elizabeth Shue in the main lead role here?
See, I know what you're setting me up for, and I'm not going to bite. I'm going to go a different direction with my response, and I'm going to comment on the writing. And I love this opening scene because we find out so much about who she is and who her character is without her even speaking a word. And I think that's just such a great and powerful way to open up. We know she's in love and she's well dressed and she's got dance moves. We know she's popular. We know all of these great things without her telling us, just by seeing her dance and kiss the photo. And it's, I don't know, it tore me right into the moment. And I thought that was fantastic.
Damn fine actress. Of course, we talked about Elizabeth Shue in Karate Kid in our archives. Check it out. Next, her date Mike shows up. He's kind of this dumpy looking dude. He says he can't go out because his sister got sick and his parents are going out for dinner and he's got to watch her. She tries to set a new date, which he kind of sidesteps and won't commit to anything. And then she goes in for a kiss and he's like, whoa, contagious. Carlos, what do you think of this Mike guy here passing on a kiss from the stunning Chris?
I mean, you could still take a kiss if you're gonna go cheat on a girl, right? Like, what's to keep you from taking a kiss? I don't know why he backed away so quickly, but he gave away pretty quickly that he might be up to something.
Right, yeah. There's definitely a snake in the grass. We can tell right away.
Can we just really quickly comment on the fact that he's the villain from Billy Madison, and this is clearly a origin story of how he became who he is in that movie?
Did you see that guy's balls?
Nice pickup, man. I definitely recognized him from something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, that's a good call for sure.
There you go. So Chris and her friend Brenda are talking in her bedroom. Brenda is sure that Mike is lying. Chris's mom comes in and says, Mrs. Anderson called and wants you to see if you can babysit tonight. She's like, no. She wants to stay home and be depressed. Brenda says, go babysit for the Andersons. That'll depress anybody. So we see Chris driving to the house next. I can't help but notice how familiar this Chicago scenery is. Of course, Christopher Columbus is the director of the film. He also directs Home Alone a couple years later, which was written by John Hughes, who directed Uncle Buck, which takes place in the same town. Man, they love these Chicago suburbs in the 80s and 90s, JD. Did you catch any of this watching it back?
Oh, yeah, it definitely takes you back to being at home in Chicago, in the Chicago area. And I like the fact that when you think of, hey, it's the 80s, what's kind of like a depressing, know-nothing area? Oh, Chicago.
There you go. They haven't been back to Chicago for movies lately, I feel like. I don't know, maybe the tax dollars aren't good there.
For what it's worth, I hear that they are revamping Illinois and Chicago, their tax incentive for films. So do expect to see a lot coming back in the future.
Hey, they agree. They're talking about doing that Home Alone with Ryan Reynolds. They could still, tap into that Home Alone market.
Oh, they're
get back into the original house.
They're going Ryan Reynolds with that?
There's some that should have been my actually news is Ryan Reynolds is attached to some this Home Alone remake or reimagining where it's a stoner, you're stoned alone, where he gets stoned, gets left alone, and he has to deal with people robbing he thinks are robbing his house or something like that. It's interesting.
If that doesn't have a Macaulay Culkin cameo, I'm not watching it.
It has to. He's resurfaced recently, so maybe he will.
Yeah, Bunny Ears podcast. Check it out. It's a pretty good show. I like it. Next, we meet the kids, Sarah and Brad. Brad's played by Keith Coogan. I know, Carlos, you had the opportunity to interact with Keith quite a few times. He's been on your podcast, man. Tell our audience a little bit about Keith and just your interactions with him.
Yeah, Keith, this is a pretty awesome, laid-back guy. I mean, he's been in the business since he was a child, and his family's been a part of the business. His dad or his grandpa, Jackie Coogan, working with Charlie Chaplin back in the day, and then basically being the poster child, literally, for having your I believe it's the guardianship or have parents not being able to take all a child actor's money, basically having that separation. And so thanks to, unfortunately Jackie had to go through it, but thanks to him, going through that it became aware that they had to instill this whole situation within Hollywood. And then so Keith Coogan, he's been in Hollywood ever since the kid, been acting in all kinds of sitcoms throughout the 80s and stuff like that. So to talk to him and just kind of pick his brain about some of the things he's been in, especially with Adventures in Babysitting, it's just it is awesome to ask some questions about things you've kind of questioned within some movies to get some answers, or probably just be like, it's a movie. Either you get a straightforward answer or you get, it's a movie. That's basically it.
Yeah, I'd love to see him get into a great TV show or something like that and get back into the limelight a little bit. He's a talented guy.
He is. He definitely he does some indie work, and he's producing a few things on his own. So he stays busy, but he's always looking to, with any actor, looking to get that next opportunity to get back into things.
Yep. Cool. So the other child, Maya Bruden, she plays Sarah here. I love her obsession with Thor. I think it's fun seeing him so prominent here in the late 80s, and then here we are 30 years later, and my 5-year-old is obsessed with Thor. I mean, it's crazy. JD, were you a fan of Thor in the late 80s? I can't remember. I remember seeing him, but I wasn't a big Thor guy.
Yeah, so for what it's worth, I had no friends growing up and spent all of my time reading comics and playing action figures and board games. So I was very down and into Thor. That sounds so weird, especially knowing how they refer to Thor in this movie.
Right.
But no, I remember watching this movie and being super stoked and being like, oh, this little girl loves Thor. That's awesome. And then being like, oh my gosh, that's Thor. And now I watch it. I'm like, oh, that's Vince D'Onofrio. However you say his name.
So Chris is going to enter here. He gets into a little argument with Sarah. Let's listen to our first clip.
Brad!
No,
Take back what you said about Thor! Take it back, Brad! Take back what you said about Thor!
I'm going to kill somebody with these things.
Take it back, Brad! Take back what you said about Thor!
No.
If you don't take it back, I'll tell Chris about all those love poems you write about her.
All right, Sarah. I'm sorry. Thor's not a homo.
Thank you. Chris.
Hi. Hi.
Hi. You didn't just hear what
No.
Cool.
Carlos, what do you think of this first scene here?
It was a great setup for everybody. Just kind of how the relationship between brother and sister, and just kind of how she's not going to take his shit. She's going to give him, a little piece of what she has to offer. And of course, any brother and sister knows that when you set yourself up for a good prank or to get your brother or sister, you have to pull it off, even if you get your way. Like she got her way, he still fessed up, but she still got him in the end. So it's definitely a great setup for all their characters, and it shows that Elizabeth Shue is crazy sneaky, Betty sneaky, in getting into that room.
Yeah, Mr. Deeds, I like it.
Nicely played.
Let me ask you this, Carlos. Do you ever have you mentioned you had a babysitter. Did you ever have a crush on that babysitter?
Yeah, so I did have a babysitter who would come when my parents would go out on Saturday night. So she would live in the neighborhood, so she would come in, and she was like, of course, in high school, and I was like a little elementary school kid. But of course, always just like, oh, there's always that chance, and she'll give me a kiss on the cheek, or like, when they leave and they give you that hug, you try to hug a little extra tighter than you should, or a little longer. But yeah, definitely have the crush on a couple babysitters.
All right, so you're literally Brad.
Yeah, I am.
I like it. JD, when you weren't reading comics by yourself, weirdo, did you have one?
So, interestingly enough, the first time I was left home alone to fend for myself, I was 6 years old. So, never really grew up with the whole babysitter thing going on in my house.
Yeah, older brother beat you up, huh?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
He would do like the wet willies, but he would just spit in my ear.
Ooh,
Ooh,
Who does that?
That's the worst. That's like a super.
That's not even a wet willy. That's just a jerk move.
That's a slurpy wurpy.
So the parents leave for the night. They mention that Chris is in charge while they're gone, and Chris tells Mr. and Mrs. Anderson that she will guard them with her life. Chris gets a phone call from Brenda, who's frantic. She's decided that she's going to run away. She's in this train station. This old guy keeps knocking on the window. He's like, "Let me in my home." And she has to keep like breaking him off, and she eventually kicks his stuff out. JD, just from the writer's perspective here, what do you like about this storyline setup that they're kind of creating here early on?
Nah, I'm not crazy about the whole Brenda motivation, as that being the overall goal to get you out. And that might be because that doesn't translate to 2018 the same way that it translated in 1987. Things like debit cards and cell phones and so many other interesting ways to just get around these problems. It didn't work for me.
1990s was big for collect calls. I remember after like basketball practice, I would collect call my mom, but I would just leave my message. Like when they said, leave your name, I'd go, "I'm done with practice, pick me up." And then she would decline it and then show up 5 minutes later and pick me up.
That's the classic move. You got to go. That's a go-to. You have to.
Couldn't give up that 15 cents.
No.
That great commercial, Bob, it's a baby, attaboy.
Yeah.
Nice. So we meet Daryl outside. He's played by Anthony Rapp. When they're starting to leave for the city, he threatens to tell his parents and then give the Andersons a call. So Chris decides he can come along. And she tells the boys, "If you give me any grief over the next 60 minutes, I swear to God, I'll kill you." Dead, murdered, stabbed. Daryl chimes in, raped. Carlos, obviously the line wouldn't fly in today's cinema without heavy protesting, but what do you think of that line from Daryl?
Given Anthony Rapp's recent allegations and things like that, yeah, it is an interesting line. Yes, it's another classic a line of its times, the 80s, where they got away with calling people fags and doing all rape jokes and things like that, got away in kids' movies, nonetheless. So yeah, probably not a line that ages well, but it is what it is. It's the 80s movies, and you can just kind of take it for what it is, especially in that era.
There have been worse, for sure. Now, as they're driving into the city, Sarah sees the Sears Tower in the distance, and she says, "That's where Thor lives." Chris is telling a scary story in the front seat, and in the back seat, Daryl's busted out his dad's Playboy. Chris looks back, she's like, "What are you guys doing?" And Brad grabs it, throws it out the window. He's, "Nothing." "Anything?" Seconds later, their tire blows out and they pull over, and the kids are laughing at the blown tire. But that's the least of their concerns. Let's listen to our next clip here.
Okay, we are gonna flag somebody down, and we'll go buy a tire. I've got my checkbook. My purse. Oh, shit. I forgot my purse. I don't have any money. I don't have my license.
Did you forget your purse?
You little asshole.
She's great.
Hey, wait, I got some money.
Here.
Oh, what, 50 cents? You don't have any money. You're a kid, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, she's right. You're a kid, for Christ's sake. You don't have any money. Why don't you just go take a walk over there, okay? Right there.
JD, what'd you think of this scene here?
I don't know. It had me wondering, was there a setup that I missed where she left without grabbing her purse?
Could be a deleted scene.
I don't know. Like, I felt like I wanted to be in on that moment where we saw her not grabbing her purse, because when she's like, my purse, I was like, well, okay. You know, they're in Chicago. There was a scene where somebody snuck in and stole it from the car. I was like, I had no idea. I wanted to be in on the moment and the joke a little bit more. Yeah, and that's me over criticizing.
Just when you think they're out of options, a semi-truck pulls over to see if they need some help. They're in trouble. The kids, of course, are scared to death here. He's got this burly-looking guy. He goes to scratch his forehead, and he's got a hook for a hand. Immediately, I thought of Scary Movie. I'm like, grab it with my good hand. Daryl says, don't listen to this guy. He just wants to scrape our faces off. The truck driver says, you kids must be from the suburbs. He pulls up his truck, and they see he's actually a tow truck driver. Chris explains they don't have any money, but he agrees to take them to the nearest shop, buy him a tire, and he introduces himself as Pruitt. Carlos, what was your first impression of Pruitt here?
Definitely a little intimidating with the beard and the hook. And of course, me growing up in a small town, anybody from the big city was intimidating or scary. So that was there's a double whammy. But yeah, I mean, he kind of comes out of nowhere, and I don't know. I didn't know the trope. It wasn't. I don't know if it was a long-lasting trope that the twist that the guy you think is gonna be the bad guy ends up being the nice guy that helps people out. So I wasn't aware of that at the time, so I didn't know. But I was definitely intimidated by the beard and the hook.
Yeah, and I love the story about how he lost it, because Daryl's like, how'd you lose that? Did you lose it in Nam? He's like, no, I was changing a tire, and Jack gave out and just popped it right off. And then he gets a CB radio, comes in, he's like, Pruitt, you're not going to like this, but that car is parked outside your house again. So he just pops it in the gear, starts flying down the road. He reaches into the glove box, grabs a gun, puts it on his hook. And when he arrives at the house, he just knocks over a red statue right in front of the house. JD, did you catch this little Easter egg here that will come in a film about 3 years later?
Yeah, no, I totally loved seeing that little Home Alone pre-reference there.
Yeah, you know what? I never put those two together. I had no idea that was from Adventures in Babysitting until I saw it. I was like, oh, light bulb. Now, when they get to the house, he goes in, he kicks open the door. We hear some gunshots, and then this guy comes flying through the window. So the kids go jump into this car, and they go to lock it, and that's when they realize that they're not alone. This guy sits up in the front seat, and he hotwires the car, starts driving off. There's a lot to digest here. But Carlos, what do you think of this first part of the scene with the action really starting to pick up here in the city?
Man, there's a lot going on in this one scene. Like you said, guy going, first of all, not pulling up, driving through the yard to get to this person's to the house, and then getting into the house, throwing the guy through the window, and then of course, like you said, going into the car, and all of a sudden a guy pops up because he's been hot wiring this car. I, of course, a reference again, growing up in small town, this kind of thing was be like, is this happen? This happens all the time. People just get in cars, and there could definitely be somebody in there just waiting to hot wire it. So to me, that seemed like a Tuesday night on any city night.
Definitely in Chicago. That's actually pretty likely. They start driving. Chris thanks the gentleman for saving their lives, and Brad's like, Chris, he's a car thief. Daryl points out that she's losing it, and she tries to rationalize that she's not losing it, and the driver's like, yeah, you losing it. So Chris asked to have them dropped off at the next street, and he's like, I wouldn't even get out of the car in this neighborhood. He tells them he has some business to tend to, but after that, he'll drop them off at a train station or something. And Chris makes him promise that he won't hurt the kids, and he promises that he won't. They arrive at a chop shop. Let's listen to a clip inside the chop shop as they meet some of the bad guys here.
Chris Parker, and that's my best friend, Daryl Cooper Smith. How you doing? Nice to meet you. Really, it's great. Great shirt. What are you doing? Hi, nice to meet you. It's a nice place you got here. Really, I love it. Thanks. Yeah, it's great. Look, we sort of took a wrong turn somewhere, and if you don't mind, we'd like to get out.
Damn. Hey, don't hold it in, Graydon. Go on and get pissed, man.
You boosted a caddy full of kids.
Hey, they got in the car while I was still in it, man. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Put them out on the street? They would have been killed.
They know where our operation is. They could go to the cops.
Sir? No, we wouldn't go to the cops.
How am I supposed to know that?
JD, what do you think about this latest predicament that the kids are in?
I like the fact that the car thief comes out to be a good guy again, and it sort of really plays on the fact of your preconceived notions of characterization. And I think that it's excellent writing, and the fact that he's standing up for them and he's trying to defend them and he's willing to protect them, to the fact that he's going to get punched in the face by this guy that I swear I know who he is, but I cannot put my finger on it. Who is this dude? Who is Graydon?
Ron Canada. So he was
That's a fantastic
That's
name.
a
Holy
great
moly.
name. Oh, wow.
He's the butler from Wedding Crashers. If you remember that scene. He's Guard Woodruff in National Treasure. I mean, he's got 142 credits. He's been around the block a couple times. So, yeah, he's been in pretty much everything. That's probably why he looks familiar.
So basically, he's parked in everybody's garage a few times.
I like the reference. Well done, sir. So we hear the guys downstairs talking about different cars and who gets what. The kids decide they need to make a run for it. So they see this hole up in the ceiling. They boost each other up. And they get up there and they've got all these beams everywhere. And Chris says, we need to get to that window. She points up. Daryl says, you got to be shitting me. Chris is like, watch your mouth, Daryl. You got to be shitting me with this. Watch my mouth. Chris is the first to go. The rest follow. I love that Joe sees what they're doing and he just kind of smiles and is like, well, they don't see it. I'm not saying anything. And they quietly make their way up there. Meanwhile, Graydon goes down to talk to the head honcho. I don't even know that guy's name. But he's like, hey, where's the Playboy magazine? So he sends Graydon upstairs and he comes back down to let him know that not only is the magazine not there, but the kids are gone. So they start giving chase. They run into a dead end in the alley trying to outrun the car. So they hop into this little dive bar in the alley and they end up on stage. The singer tells them, hey, no one gets out of here without singing the blues. Chris turns to Daryl and she's like, I can't sing. So she gets up to the mic and she just introduces herself and starts telling her story. And of course, they turn it into this awesome blues song. Carlos, what do you think of this scene?
I feel like at this point, if you're in Chicago making a movie, you have to do a scene like this. It's like it's like the tax write-off doesn't come into play unless you do a scene like this. And so, I was. It's not a scene that I would say it's one I would recall or tell people they have to see it if they're going to watch Adventures in Babysitting, but it is entertaining to say the least. One that I'm not sure how it would play if it really played out that way in reality. Have you guys ever ran into a random jazz night
I wish.
Nothing like that's happened? Okay, so yeah.
Yes, I've done that a few times. I've got a great story involving New Orleans that I will only tell offline.
Oh, I've heard that story. It's a beautiful one. Yes. I love it. So outside, Brad is talking to Chris, and he's telling her how she should give some other guys a chance. And that Mike guy, he's a real loser, and she's too good for him. And she's like, well, what other guys are you talking about? And he says, well, me. She laughs, calls him a child again, and the conversation's broken up when they see Daryl talking to a prostitute. So they run over to try and save him. And we find out she's a 17-year-old girl just like Chris. And Chris is like, how did you end up on the streets? She's like, I ran away from home, just like Brenda. We cut to Brenda, who can't see now because she had her glasses taken. And she goes over to what she thinks is a small kitten. And the janitor guys are like, that's a giant sewer rat. She drops it and runs off. And then we cut back to the kids. And the Chop Shop guys have caught back up. So they have to go to the train station. And they just barely get away. The doors close and the train takes off. And that's going to take us into this next scene here. Carlos, what do you think about the giant rat scene? I thought that was pretty fun.
Very relatable because it's happened to an aunt of mine before who thought she was letting one of her cats into the house and she had to call animal control to get a raccoon out of there. So yes, it's I can see that definitely happening. Although Brenda, she's very helpless in all these situations. Yeah. I do feel sorry for her, but man, she kind of has it coming in some of these situations.
So on the train, they end up in the middle of a gang fight now. What else can happen to them? Brad comes to the rescue, kind of. Let's listen to the clip here.
Are you gonna let him get away with that? Wait a minute. I was kidding. That was really rude. Take it back. Apologize.
Stay out of this.
He called you a bitch.
Brad, shut up!
Hey, listen to the bitch, Brad.
Watch your mouth. You big city scum sucker.
You just can't keep your foot out your mouth, can you, boy?
Let me help.
Don't fuck with the lords of hell.
Don't fuck with the babysitter.
JD, what'd you think of this scene?
So obviously this is the scene that horrified me as a child.
Yep.
Yup. I don't know. Like logistically, they're surrounded by this like Jets versus Sharks kind of a gang fight going on. Everyone's got weapons. One dude literally has a whip. Like I feel like we're in Anchorman right now.
I think these guys literally just stepped off the set of Beat It just to film this scene.
And exactly, and it's just the most random, just throw all these random dudes in there, and then when she pulls a knife and she's like, don't mess with the babysitter, like you're surrounded by two step dance gangs and they've all got switchblades. But that's totally cool. Let the bitch off the train.
I love Chris's line at the end. She don't fuck with the babysitter. Oh, she's badass. I love it. So they make it off the train. They head to the hospital. And Brad's big wound ends up being solved all with one stitch. And he's like, man, the one time I'll ever get into a gang fight and all I get is one stitch. Chris and the kids make their way back to check on Brad. They run into the doctor. And there's actually two people that got stabbed that night. One of them didn't make it, but they don't know that yet. And they're like, we're checking on our friend. He had a stab wound. He's like, oh yeah, but he died. Chris passes out. Brad, of course, isn't dead. He walks out of the room and he's like, what's wrong? Sarah and Daryl run over to hug him. When Chris comes to, she hugs him as well, which Brad really likes. And then they're told to follow the doctor to fill out some paperwork. And right when they're about ready to finally get in trouble and the gag's up, the man who slept with Pruitt's wife comes out of the hospital room demanding his car back. And then Pruitt comes out with a pretty gnarly like shoulder tackle and knocks the guy down. He's like, follow me, I'll get you back to your car. Carlos, what do you think of Pruitt coming to the rescue here?
Where did this guy come from is my first question. Like, is he towing something? He could have had a one line like, oh, I was towing this guy and I saw you guys from the distance. Like, what the hell were you doing there, man? Like, did you follow us? Like, that was my first question. But it's the Deus Ex Machina, they just come out of nowhere. You need someone to help along with the plot. Yeah, I was definitely it was helped because the story did kind of come to a halt with the whole hospital scene, stuff like that. So it's nice that he came in back with a little action to kind of get things kicked up again.
So they get outside. Pruitt tells them the car is fixed up. It's at Dawson's garage. He paid for the window because that was his fault. But they have to pay for the tire. That's going to be $50. And they're like, all right, whatever. We'll figure it out. We don't have any money, but we'll make it happen. He says he has to go. He's a fugitive now. And he takes off as the police officers chase after him. we get into a frat party next. Daryl runs in first, the rest follow. Chris gets approached by a couple guys who think she's Miss March from Playboy. It's pretty good resemblance too. I like what they're doing there. She tells them that that's not her, and then one of the frat guys comes to her rescue, and they kind of make eyes with each other here. He thinks she's the prettiest girl at University of Chicago, but he's pretty shocked to hear that she's just a senior in high school. So they dance on the party floor. Brad watches with some jealousy. Meanwhile, Daryl's about to score with this college chick when her boyfriend calls her name, and she tells him that he's been replaced. The guy grabs Daryl, and he was about to punch him out when somebody interjects, and they leave the frat house. And the nice guy from the party gives him $45 and then a ride to Dawson's garage. JD, pretty good luck here, grabbing the $45, making it out scot-free. What'd you think of this?
I like this scene, and it reminds me so much of the college party scene in Orange County, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. I would be very curious to what kind of comparison or inspiration was taken from this particular scene and then drilled into Orange County, because it's almost like a line-for-line remake.
Yeah.
But the fact that this dude looks like a poor man's Paul Rudd just had me dying.
Yeah.
And I know he's in Father of the Bride, right?
You got me on that one. I don't know. Could be.
Fact check me.
You remember his name? Is it Dan?
I don't remember his name,
it's
and I
Dan.
just watched this movie like 2 hours ago.
They don't say his name. Yep, there you go. I found him.
Gotcha.
Yep, fact checked. Father of the Bride 1 and 2.
Boom.
So inside Dawson's garage, they can't find anyone. Finally, they run into Mr. Dawson. He's this tall, muscular guy with a hammer, long blonde hair. Sarah yells, "Thor!" and she kneels at his feet. He implies that he isn't Thor, but Sarah says that's because it's his secret identity. Mr. Dawson, aka Thor, says, "This is only $45. I need 50 or no car." Sarah says, "I thought you were supposed to help those in need." He said, "Not in the city. I don't have to abide by those rules." She tells him that's because he doesn't have his special helmet on. And she gives him her helmet, and he's kind of really taken back by it. So he tosses them the car keys and tells them to get out of here. And then he gives her back the helmet and says, "I don't really need it. I got my own at home." What'd you think of this scene, Carlos?
I thought it was interesting with Vincent de, you know, he definitely looks a lot more in shape than he does in recent films. But he, when his blonde hair, it was kind of throwing me off back in the day. Even as a kid, I was like, I don't think that's his natural hair. But yeah, the nice gesture was good. It kind of ambiguous of like, is he really Thor? Is he just kind of making, playing up to the kid to make her happy? Seeing the good side. Of course, we're seeing the good side of people, like you talked about earlier. Seeing like the preconceived notions of people. You're like, oh, they do 3 dimensions to everybody. A lot of the characters in this story do have 3 dimensions, so it's nice to see these different aspects.
Yeah, definitely. So downtown, Chris pulls up to the restaurant that Mike was supposed to take her to tonight, and she says, "Oh no." She explains the story about how she was supposed to go out tonight, but they got sick, and she didn't get to go. And then Daryl points out, "Hey, isn't that Mike's car right there?" And they look over. It sure is, because he's got his douchebag license plate on there that stands out. So of course, Chris is going to confront him. She heads in, and she confronts Mike right away. He's eating dinner with, the girl's name is Senesi Sessler. Say that 10 times fast. And Mike tries to play it off, but then she calls him out, and he says, "We weren't half as serious as you thought we were." And then Brad comes to the rescue this time with the help from Daryl. So let's listen to the boys standing up more here.
All right, you let go of her. Geez, you're picking him kind of young, aren't you?
This kid's got more class at 15 than you'll ever have.
You're such a loser.
Here we go again.
I can only dream of having somebody like Chris for a girlfriend. But you've got her. And you treat her like this?
Don't waste your time, Half Pint. Her legs are locked together at the knee.
I I'd love to hit you. I'd love to pound on your face.
Yeah? Go ahead. But I won't. You're so slimy, I won't sink to your level. I will.
All right, JD, what do you think about Daryl kicking old Mike right in the ass?
Dude, a swift kick in the ass always does the trick. And I got a story, actually, if you want to hear it.
Lay it on us.
So there was a time when I was like 5 years old where me and my older brother weren't mortal enemies. And he was getting picked on. And, you know, the bully was pushing him and doing whatever bullies do. I didn't get into that until high school. And I walked up behind the guy and I kicked him in the butt and shoved him into a bush. So that's what you do. That's how you rock and roll. You kick somebody from behind in the butt, not the boot. I'm not Canadian. Let me say that again. You come up behind somebody, you kick him in the butt, and you shove him into something. That also sounds really bad given all of the non-2018 things that happened in this movie. Sorry, Thor.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. What happened after you kicked him in the bush?
Ran like hell and didn't look back.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe he like cried and apologized and you guys bitch smacked him or something. I don't know.
Oh, who has time for that? No. You run like hell.
Okay.
I still adopt that to fights. If I get into a bar fight, it's like one swift kick to the nuts and then run like hell.
Yeah, that always
That's
works.
That's a good strategy.
They go back outside. They've lost track of Sarah, and she's looking at the toy store when the car thieves show up, and they start chasing after her. And Sarah sees her dad's building in the distance, and she runs to it. We see Chris, Brad, and Daryl searching all over for her, calling out her name. And then Brad points out, hey, that's my dad's building. Maybe she's there. So they go over there. Sarah's still trying to escape them. She gets out. She goes out of a window at the top of the building, and she holds onto a rope and starts to propel herself down this real tall building. Graydon goes after her, and he tries to pull her up by the rope. She lets go, and I don't know if the rope breaks, but she like just barely catches a little ledge with her feet. She's saved for now. We cut to Chris, who's trying to sneak past the party with Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. She grabs this big fur jacket and makes her way through the party. And then like the main mobster guy finds her behind this table, crouched down. But Mr. and Mrs. Anderson come over to kind of save the day, and they're asking about the hors d'oeuvres. They're like, who's the caterer? This guy's like, I don't know. So meanwhile, Chris like wraps his leg with a cord, and then she kind of bolts out. And then we see just kind of make their way back to the top of the building here. This could be a long scene, so I'm going to cut here for a second. Carlos, what do you think about the first part of this little getaway scene here by the kids trying to rescue Sarah?
This is the tiniest party. Yeah, I think this is the tiniest party these parents made an excuse to leave their kids for one. This is like a closet they're literally partying in. But yeah, it's a lot to unfold. Like you said, we have out on the window. There's someone had to pay attention to her on the window to make sure Chris is not being caught by the parents inside, but also being trying to get away from the bad guys. So yeah, so much going on. Just tiny little room. While she's got this perfect little like fur coat on that she's running around in. Yeah, I don't know. It was one of those that we didn't have too many action scenes, so this is kind of like their other than the raptor scene. Escaping from the warehouse. I think this is like the next best thing they could do with the dangling on the window. So it was it had some tension, I guess. It was building a little bit of tension.
Yeah, so we actually see Sarah scaling the building from the outside window. Of course, nobody sees her, which, I mean, not only do they not see her, but honestly, you didn't hear her. Like, the glass had to be like squeaking. Kids go up to the open window. They throw down the rope to Sarah. And as they're pulling her up, they're like, don't worry about that guy because he's just like scared stiff. Graydon's holding on for dear life, and she just walks right on past him. And then Brad pulls her in. Sarah's like, can we finally just go home now? When they hear a voice say, not yet. It's Joe. And he comes back. He says, not going to hurt him. He just needs the Playboy. That's all they were after. There's some notes in there that they need. he looks at a picture and then looks back at Chris, and she's like, "Don't you dare." And he smiles and says, "Nah, she doesn't even compare to you." They run into the main bad guy though. He says, "Give me the magazine. I'll take care of the kids." But instead, Joe knocks him out. And he turns to Chris and says, "You're right. Babysitting is hard." JD, what do you think of this scene?
Why is that not a T-shirt yet? Or maybe it was in like 1992 when babysitting was a big thing. Babysitting is hard.
I'd buy that shirt now.
I know you would.
Adventures in babysitting. I love me some movie T-shirts.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Everyone does.
So they're cruising back to the suburbs. They drop by and pick up Brenda. She gets in the car. She's like, "What took you guys so long? You're not going to believe the night I've had." On the road, they pull up.
I'm going to interject really quick, and I'm just going to say, we have not yet talked about the comparison between Brenda and Barb from Stranger Things. Is she not just Barb from Stranger Things?
The same exact glasses I think they used.
Right?
Yeah.
Was I the only one thinking that this entire movie? I was like, "Damn it, Barb, get the hell out of here!"
Yeah.
The sequel, they're gonna be saving Brenda from the Upside Down.
I love it. She's played by Penelope Ann Miller. I don't think we mentioned that, but she's had a great career. Carlito's Way, The Artiste, The Shadow. So anyway, they pull up next to the Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, and they duck as they drive by. Mrs. Anderson says, "You know what? Brad and Sarah are going to be driving soon, and with lunatics out here like that, I don't feel safe." They get back to the house. They quickly start cleaning and getting everything ready for bed. Mrs. and Mrs. Anderson arrive home as Chris is frantically cleaning up the kitchen. She runs, jumps on the couch, grabs a magazine, and they walk in. The minute she pops that thing open, and she explains that the kids are upstairs getting ready for bed. Daryl's staying over, and Mrs. Anderson says, "Daryl? Ooh, what a nightmare for you." Chris smiles and goes upstairs and said they bought it. Sarah wants her to come babysit again next Friday, and she's like, "I don't know about that." Brad says, "I know seniors don't hang out with freshmen, so if I see you at school and I say hi and you ignore me, it's fine." And Chris says, "Nope, I'm not going to ignore you because that's not what you do to friends." Daryl thanks her for the best night of his life, and so do Brad and Sarah. I thought this was a pretty cool scene. Carlos, what do you think of we got one more little part left, but what do you think of this?
I really loved it because the whole rushing with the parents coming home and having to cover all your tracks. My sister and I had did that countless times. Whenever my parents would be coming home from anything, we'd be rushing to all the chores, do the last 30 seconds as they're pulling up and jumping on the couch and look all casual. But yeah, to add to it too, a little bit of closure. Brad, he knows that he may not have the chance yet, but he still, has somewhat of a relationship with Chris, and maybe there's still a chance, even though, the stigma back in the day, freshmen don't hang out with seniors. But hey, I went to the prom, I went to the school dance with the seniors, so there's chances. So Brad shouldn't put himself out like that.
Hey, well done, sir.
Hey, it was an act of desperation. I was total like this is I was gonna bomb or hit, and luckily she said yes. So
miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Michael Jordan. There you go.
And Michael Scott.
Yes. She leaves for the night. She gets outside. We see the frat guy from earlier, Dan. He's tracked her down. He brought back Sarah's, I think they're like skates or something that she was on, or like roller skates, yeah. And she says, "Oh, you came back for the money." He's like, "No, I came for a babysitter." She says, "Well, after tonight, I think I'm done babysitting." "Why? Who did you need me to babysit for?" He says, "Me." Chris says retirement can wait, and then Sarah yells from the window, "Kiss him," and the scene fades out with the kiss. JD, what do you think of the happy ending here, the Scooby-Doo?
Yeah, definitely Scooby-Doo, kind of out of left field. He comes back, he's got the skates, everything is quite happy and packaged, and 1987 is a very different world than we live in now. So congrats to you guys. But it works out well, so I'm happy for him. But I love the way that it ends with Brad peeking out of the window and closing the blinds like a little curmudgeon, like, "Get off my lawn."
Yeah, he was very creepish with the way that he was watching, and then he slowly shuts the blinds. I would love that.
Might as well had his pants down while he was doing it.
Yeah, that'd be a good question to ask Keith next time you talk to him. Like, "Dude, what's up with that? What was the direction there?"
Yeah, where were you going with that?
So, Carlos, the movie's 31 years old, man. How do you feel like this is held up over the years?
I think it has held up pretty well. It's not everything like we talked about. There's some couple lines, couple things that didn't age well, but overall it's still entertaining. Some of the scenarios still play today, or like still remind me, like I talked about, the rushing to clean everything before your parents get home and things like that. Just it still brings up memories like that, and the execution, and it looks like a John Hughes or a Chris Columbus film, so it looks great. And of course, growing up with those John Hughes films and seeing Chicago, I never lived in Chicago, but I feel like I have by seeing all these movies that were made in Chicago. So it just kind of has that, and I have family up there, so we've been up there. So it just kind of has that kind of connection to me as well. So I still enjoy this movie. I can't say too many bad things about it. I enjoy it. Keith Coogan is a great guy. And the acting and everything is great in it too. So I don't have too many bad things to say about it.
But we can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been really fun
Yeah.
going down this road. And man, please again plug your show and let our audience know where they can follow you.
Yeah, again, appreciate you guys having me on, and everybody, you guys can check out the Be Kind and Rewind podcast on Thursdays on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spreaker, YouTube, iHeartRadio, pretty much anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can find it. You can follow us on at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Be Kind Rewind Pod. My co-host isn't with me here today, but he's recently come onto the show. My good friend from back home, Dylan. So he couldn't make it tonight, but he will be co-hosting for me from now on. So it's been a great pleasure having him on. So like I said, every Thursday, just tune in. We got we're doing the Sandlot commentary this coming week, followed by Shane Obaneski from The Sandlot the following week. So we got a couple good ones and some other celebrity interviews coming up too.
All right, good old repeat, man. I'm excited for that
Yeah,
interview.
we'll try to. And we're gonna reach out for some Twitter questions. So for those of you who've been, itching to ask these guys some questions to find some stuff out about the Sandlot, get it in there.
The Colossus of Clout.
Colossus of Clout.
Yeah, we're going to be back next week with an all-new episode. We've got our poll topic ending this week, so we recorded a little bit early, but it's going to be the winner from our football poll topic, Varsity Blues, the program Waterboy, or Necessary Roughness. Should be a great episode. As always, make sure you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, YouTube. Make sure you drop us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. It's time to get back into our DeLorean, punch in today's date, and return back the present day. Talk to you next week. See ya.
You slip me the cash and I'll slip you the wiener.